Can you beat Sodden Sanctuary using only a hammer? There are around 9 different hammers in this game, all scaling with mainly strength and most dealing solid damage. But will that damage be enough all on its own? Because for today's run, we're not allowed to use any buffs or charms. Buffs refer to any imbue you could place on your weapon. Lightning, fire, blessed pages, and arcane are not allowed whatsoever. No charms also means we can't gain elemental damage or extra attack speed from that mechanic. Today, we find out just how strong pure hammer really is in Sodden Sanctuary. We name our character Bonk just to get in the right headspace and move on to select the Paladin class, starting us off with a heavy armor stat and the hammer class 1. We then grab the grasping ring for extra salt and begin our journey. As I was taking off my armor for a lighter roll, I noticed something really cool. The Paladin class starts with the mending band. Even though they don't show it to you in selection, you get health regen at the start of the game. Very handy if you can imagine. Unlike most runs, we're already at our first obstacle, the Unspeakable Deep, because while most often you die here, we actually need to beat the monstrosity. If defeated, the beast drops a black pearl, 8,000 salt, and a shimmering pearl, a very rare yet valuable tool used in transmuting weapons. Safe to say, he's not an easy challenge to overcome though. We can take one hit and survive, but only at full health, and we don't have any healing items yet. I had him pretty darn close, but sadly got greedy and hit with an AoE, which means we gotta delete that character and start on over. On the second try, I got even closer, but still nothing. He kept sticking close to the left side, giving me no room to dodge around. Well, delete that character too and try again. The trick to this fight is mainly a light roll. You need to be quickly dodging as far as possible behind him as he telegraphs all his attacks. Dodge roll, hit once, maybe twice if you're feeling lucky, and dodge behind again. He only has 2 or 3 moves, which all of them hit out in front. Keeping him in the middle of the ship is also key because you need enough room on both sides of him to maneuver. Top this all off with his massive HP bar and our low damage, making for a no-hit battle, slogging it out. Towards the end, our stamina cap will also have been lowered from so much use, making it even trickier to get attacks off and still dodge. But patience is a beautiful thing, and after 5 minutes of grueling determination, the invader gets hammered. And not in a good way. Somehow we still end up shipwrecked, but this time more prepared than ever. Black pearl, shimmering pearl, and 8,000 salt in hand. We're gonna be just fine. Selecting the Goddess of Light, we join the Devara Creed. Not our final option for the run, but definitely a good pick for now. Our victory over an unbeatable foe rewards us with plus 10 levels in strength and an extra heal to start things off with. And that shows. This is a lot of damage in such an early area. Of course, we go loot the bandaged ring, reducing the wounding effect, because playing melee without this is pretty tough, honestly. Well, how goes the Sodden Knight? Okay. Looks like a jumping heavy attack deals buttloads of damage, and I may be a bit over-leveled since the fight barely lasted 8 seconds. Me taking no damage and dealing more than ever before, it has to be a good sign. I decided to grab class 2 hammers because the sooner the better, and 2 more points in strength. While making my way to the next sanctuary, my hammer is completely stomping everything in my path. One-hitting stuff really does make the game so much easier. No surprise there. At the 3 sanctuary, we grab the ever so important blacksmith armor. While this is typically a must-have for fire defense, we merely want the gloves. Blacksmith gloves, when worn, grant plus 3 to your strength stat. No reason to ever take these off then. Since charms are off the menu this time around, we waste no time going for those and instead grab the bright coral ring. Extra stamina is the single most important thing when rocking hammers, but more on that later. Hey, we've got all 4 ring slots filled out already. Paladin is pretty stacked, I have to say. Good club, nice and tanky armor, a healing ring, what more could you ask for? With 4 more points in strength and upgrading my Morning Star to level 3, we face the Queen of Smiles. Here we get to see how important buffs can be. Right before this arena, they give you 3 blessed pages. Without that, our damage isn't horrible, but it's not nearly as overwhelming as it was against the Sodden Knight. She's actually very resistant to both strike and slash damage with a major weakness to Holy. Also factor in that not having a light dodge makes avoiding damage 10 times harder, and it's not the perfect battle by any means. I started getting brutalized for a while, using up all my heals in the process. When I then remembered that, oh yeah, I could block. So often do I forget to use that. But with the mending band healing up damage taken, we still die. Yeah, I did get too sloppy early on, but with another go, I should fare much better. With heals appropriately used this time, blocking makes the queen out to be a joke. Pin her in a corner and slam down for an epic finish. Plus 3 points in strength sounds like the best idea because bigger number, make happy. For the Mad Alchemist, we're back to dealing really solid damage. He doesn't seem particularly weak to anything, while also not having major defenses overall. I can tell you, I love holding down my heavy attack as long as possible for that gorgeous yellow damage. The stagger is solid, and as long as I have enough time to charge it up, the boss gets demolished. Slimes only take one hit or so. Oh crap, this is getting ugly all of a sudden, isn't it? Yeah, the Mad Alchemist is super easy, unless you can't keep him busy. Stop stunning him and this magic show happens, leaving you with no room to move around. Heavy armor is actually really strong though, letting us tank just enough to stay in the fight. And once his spammy moveset's over, it's clobbering time. One extra heal in the skill tree and on we go. My lessons from the Queen of Smiles carries over for the false jester. Blocking is very much helpful, and not getting greedy for more than one hit at a time makes all the difference. I finally got to use the Water of Blessing for my main creed, and to tell you the truth, these are just solid overall. Decently fast healing, lasts a good few seconds, and is more aggressive than the red grass I often use. This boss is a rare case where he's pretty weak to everything. No major defenses overall, with the only challenge being how jumpy he is. While my jumping slam down attack looks amazing with a quick attack and extremely large damage, it's not actually the best move to use all the time. Often this will leave you vulnerable and leads to unnecessary damage taken. The heavy attack has a similar problem, or actually charging it up all the way is hard to pull off. Still, it looks way too cool not to try. With just the right timing, I beat down the jester and begin to realize this is quickly becoming my favorite weapon type. Grabbing the totem brand, I then head back to level into +4 endurance so I can actually move around a little bit, and class 2 heavy armor for later. Now up in the Castle of Storms, I continue to bash down everything easily and find the mending band. Since I started with this, can I wear 2 of them and stack the healing? Sadly, it doesn't seem to be the case, but oh well, having it early is still really helpful. The Kraeken Wyrm is as fiery as ever today, being weaker to strike and mainly resistant to poison. For once, my hammer is really good against the flying beast, and for some reason hammers just hit a little bit further than they would seem. I noticed this against several enemies in different areas, but there's just a bit more reach on the weapon than you would think from actually looking at it. Very helpful for hitting the bugger up in the air and staying further out from upcoming attacks. Unfortunately, he still managed to combo me with a melee attack into fire and then jumping all over me just to top it off. On the second try, however, he stood no chance. He made the very poor choice of flying more often than not, and oh no, look who could still jump attack while you're all the way up there. This lets me ignore all the difficult attacks he has and just simply run away from fire instead. I mean, come on man, after the first 4 times you would think, hey, maybe I should switch it up. But nope, a dragon's poor life choices are my gain with a nice headshot to finish things off. We now gain access to the wall jump brand and increase strength by 2. I was also able to level into class 3 and 4 hammers for my major upgrade here soon. After a lot of smashing and bashing through the red halls, I reached the spinning wheels. Below them is a secret door on the wall leading to the Golden Mask Creed. This is the House of Splendor, which will be our main creed we use from now on. There's several reasons for this, but before we explain that, let's first take down the Tree of Men. Being one of the more creative bosses in Salt and Sanctuary, you're often going to do better with a ranged option here. Melee isn't nearly as easy to use here, but the damage certainly doesn't slack. We start by hitting all the hanging men off of his metal frame. Like I said earlier, the hammers have just a bit more range than you might think, making this a reasonable task. Jumping off the first platform is enough to not take fall damage and get the middle ones out of the way. Now into second phase, it's almost too easy to hit his head if the fire on the top rung is kind enough to go off at the right times. But then begins third phase, and man, this one is a lot to handle for melee. I need to run to the opposite side I'm on every time he begins to flame, but for the life of me, I cannot get the side flames to match up with the attack, leaving me with no chance to hit his head. All I need is 2 or 3 hits, but I can't even get in a single opening. After a lot of patience, he finally let me get a huge hit in, and instead of even trying on that right side, I moved back over to smack him down. Great damage here, with strike being the better option, but still tricky at times. I used my salt to grab class 5 hammers and 2 extra points in strength. Finally, we're ready to get things going here. To begin the next quest on my journey, I did the usual. Grab the key under the boss arena, open up the doors using a lever, and fight the Disemboweled Husk. Except, wow, my damage has really fallen off here hard. He's heavily resistant to strike and mainly weak to holy, which does not bode well for us. Since hammers deal 100% strike and no slash, there isn't a lot of workaround when certain bosses counter you. But don't you worry, because I have a plan. Transmuting our Morning Star, we can turn it into a much much bigger hammer. Sadly, this costs 100,000 salt that I don't even remotely have enough of, which means we need to farm out enemies for some time. While we do that, let's try and kill 2 birds with 1 stone. By this, I mean let's hunt down some materials for our new Golden Creed leader. You need exactly 3 ears from different enemy types, but some are harder to get than others. Skullbats are like a super easy one since they're very common in the first festering banquet tower. Drowned soldier ears are a bit tougher, dropping from soldiers with shields. There is one just outside the 3 sanctuary that's pretty quick to farm out. Ember Skull Ashes drop from the fiery skulls in the Castle Storms. There's actually around 8 of them if you head down into the middle of the castle. Our damage right now is more than enough for even the large knights here, but since they also drop torches on occasion, it takes a bit longer. Heartseeker nerves are the absolute worst to collect, as you need to defeat these floating eye creatures. There's never really more than 1 or 2 of these in a single area, and they make enemies around them completely immune to damage. Each of them takes multiple hits to kill, has a very low drop rate, and are in locations you can't really run back and forth from. I decided to stick to climbing the circle wheel outside the House of Splendor Creed Sanctuary. You need to maneuver around a mad scythe wielder, but it's not the worst run back I've ever seen. It took like an hour for all 3 of these to drop, but thankfully Whisperman Ashes are up next. These drop from the invisible ghosts in the Dome of the Forgotten. We don't want to fight the bosses here yet, but there are always 4 of these ghastly creatures huddled together, making for quick farming. All of that done with a bit more farming after we finally have enough salt to transmute the Morning Star into a class 5 hammer known as the Mountain Breaker. You require the Tree of Men boss defeated and a Shimmering Pearl, a very late game item. But wait, we defeated the Unspeakable Deep to grab one early. Afterwards, I turned in all my ears and received 5 golden wine for my Creed leader. Since we can't use regular melee buffs or charms to increase our damage, this will supplement that instead. It's a special wine that increases your physical damage by 50%, improves physical defenses by 200% and magical defense by 100%, and boosts gold find rate by 100%. Extremely powerful, as you might imagine. The only caveat is you're gonna get poisoned if you spam this and your heals too often. But more about that later. For now, we head out to test our new build against the Kraeken Cyclops, a large beast heavily resistant to our damage type. And oh yeah, that's looking awesome. With the golden wine consumed, I deal considerable damage and take almost none from even boss attacks. A charge hit looks more than glorious, but wow, is that attack speed abysmal. This means I'm going to be able to wipe boss health off the screen in seconds, but will take hits often unless I'm careful. A fair trade, don't get me wrong, but it's something we got to keep in mind nonetheless. The golden wine buff lasts around 60 seconds, giving me plenty of time to clean up the mess. Attack once and wait to dodge for optimal gameplay, then finish him off with the most elegant and disrespectful jump smash you've ever seen. It's almost enough to bring tears to your eyes. We grab an extra heal at our sanctuary and get ready for a rematch. The Disemboweled Husk is still extremely resistant to our damage. Even with an extra 50% boost in damage and a larger hammer, he's not going down without a fight. The main change to focus on, however, is not damage, but defense. The wine greatly boosts damage negation, allowing me to heal through the gunshots and sword swings. Unfortunately, the red wine I now have for healing from this creed is not actually very good, being one of the slowest options available and not lasting near as long as even red grass heals do. Plus, if I happen to use them too often, it poisons me. Not something I need to worry about much, but it can get you in trouble if you don't pay attention. This pesky pirate is one of the biggest stamina battles in the game. He's constantly keeping you moving in some way. Dodging gunshots, running from the raining shrapnel, hitting him whenever possible, he does not let up. Also, it's probably the wrong choice, but I can't stop myself from jump slamming down on his head. It's too much fun, man, I can't help it. My newfound power was just too much for the undead fellow. I put him to rest hoping more bosses are less resistant to blunt damage in the future. Future me, fat chance on that one. Now in the swamp, I made sure to grab the Vile Vine's ring under the first platform because poison plus poisoning myself on occasion is not a good combination. With a new sanctuary found, I grabbed class 3 heavy armor to round out the build. What I neglected to mention earlier is that I did every single Creed leader task available except for one. The reason for this is I needed to get leprous ears, but the jumping dagger fiends that drop them are only found in this foul swamp, locked behind the pirate. Since there's about 15 or so running around the swamp, it takes no time at all to chop their ears off. With the hammer. Painful process, I know, but needs to be done. Back at my Creed leader, I decided I'd had enough golden wine and instead bought 1 cleansing cloth. This is how you get rid of the poison from your own healing. And looking back on it now, 5 golden wine and 1 cloth is not the best ratio. Probably say 3 and 3 would do you one better. And now, because we're rank 7 devotion in this creed from turning in all the ears, the blacksmith sells resplendent armor, a glorious looking armor set that has pretty solid stats as well. I didn't buy the gloves, however. With a giant hammer and heavy armor class 3, I'm super heavy right now. No reason to take off gloves that already increase strength and make it any worse. So with a new look, no helmet due to weight issues, but half of a new look, we go up against the Stench most foul. And, well, I'm kind of immortal at this point. The Mess of Mouths is also strong against strike, being weak to fire and holy. So it's not optimal damage yet, but not looking that bad either. My main concern was with the Flying Mouths. If you charge up to hit the boss, they can stop your attack even at the last second. Poison's nothing. I mean, I could cure it with the many potions I bought from my merchant. But still, the mouths take 2 hits at least. Unlike when I did my gun run here, the hammer can in fact hit the boss and basic enemies in a single attack, leading to me just attacking the boss and dealing with annoying pests by chance. Easy to hit, takes solid damage, and it can't kill me. That's a very reasonable win if you ask me. On up ahead, I grab the mossy ring for increased stamina regen that I desperately need, and take my red bar brand from the lady here. With me still being really heavy, I went into 6 points of endurance and took the boat across the water. We did skip the Forgotten Dome earlier in order to more quickly set up the build, so let's head back and finish off the bosses there. The Untouched Inquisitor has mainly 2 attacks, yet somehow I always end up having trouble with them. She too is heavily resistant to strike, while being very weak to fire, arcane, and heck, even slash damage. I am finally able to wear my cool golden helmet, but this does mean my dodge is terrible. Blocking should be more than effective to make up for this, but it's slow going either way. Basically, I just jump attack over and over, which does tend to stagger her every 2 hits or so that's nice, helping to keep my stamina up before another attack gets off. She can't kill me, and it takes forever for me to kill her. A charge attack does solid damage, but finding time when the boss is low enough for that is more than rare. In the end, maybe use fire or arcane here, because pure bonk is not in any way spectacular. What I can do is buy salt with excess gold that I have. Since the golden wine buff gives me more from bosses, and I don't really need it for anything, I could purchase loads of salt from the merchant, leading to more and more upgrades. Right now, I stick to +5 endurance because having this sluggish of a roll is not going to cut it later on. The third lamb, who I happen to call the first lamb in my last video, is a bit of a mess. Which, by the way, why third lamb? Maybe for 3 animals in 1? And another funny thing here is the third lamb happens to be the thrall or underling of the Untouched Inquisitor. But the third lamb is way tougher to deal with and definitely more powerful. Anyway, this beast is maxed out against our damage. Heavily resistant to poison, holy, and lightning, and weak to fire, slash, and arcane. It looks like the midsection of the game is filled to the brim with non-hammer related bosses. Hopefully, that changes here soon. And yeah, this fight did not look pretty. I've got enough defenses to beat the boss on a first try, but it was a lot of getting juggled into the air by AoEs and being shocked by lightning as I tried to charge up a heavy smash. Not having a good dodge is bad for large bosses like this, as you can't move past them quick enough. I had to use red shards for healing at one point because I couldn't do anything but take hit after hit. The end started looking a bit cleaner once I stopped hugging so close to the monster, but wow, this went horribly. A shock resistance ring could have helped a bit, but still, Blunt was dealt dirty in this golden dome. We collect our blue bar brand and increase endurance by 3 points for very obvious reasons. With both of our bar brands in hand, let's go say hello to the Dried King. And hey, look at that! Finally a boss weak to strike damage. Holy's gonna be the best option, but I will take what I can get. The king is very simple and actually a hilarious fight under these conditions. He starts by getting staggered, unable to even attack for over a quarter of his health bar. Then getting a fire blazing under my feet, I tank all of it and keep on smashing. I had to dodge a few times, is really the only thing I need to say. Poor guy didn't even stand a chance as I pummeled him into oblivion. Here we collect the jump dash rune and grab an extra heal because why not? Well, what about the Bloodless Prince? Typically, this giant colossus does not go well for me. By this time, however, my dodge has finally been upgraded to deal with the brute. Of course, he's weak to everything except for poison and strike, which is no surprise at this point, yet I was feeling pretty good. 1 or 2 dodges into the middle of his feet got me past his attacks and let me charge up one of my own. Watching out for the arm swipe and stomps, you can run back in and keep up the damage. Not a short battle by any means. I'm certain that without the golden wine, this would have been a nightmare. I mean, the damage I'm dealing is not a lot, even with a 50% boost. There is another increase we can get here soon to help with that, just not quite yet. I've not done a magic only run yet, but by the looks of things, having high amounts of different elements will be insanely powerful. Now inside the ruined temple, I was going to make my way to another boss, but instead, let's get that damage boost I was just talking about. I'd love to tell you how I got here, pummeling my way past the arm-throwing creepoids and jumping around some platforms. Unfortunately, I was entirely lost during this process. The only thing I could say is once you find a lever and open up the right gate, go that direction. It leads into a very small blue biome where you climb some steps and find the Bloodflower Ring, which grants you a 10% boost to attack power. Not all that hard to get to, aside from some lost confusion to get over, and now we have 60% more physical damage in total for the build. Considering my hammer already deals high numbers, that's actually really strong. 4 more points in endurance to even further improve our dodge, which, all things considered, I am still loving this armor set. It looks awesome. Up next, we find the Coveted, who always scare me. 600 slash resistance, only weak to arcane damage, and having a sizable health bar. Things tend to go poorly here. Hold on a minute, do my eyes deceive me? 0 resistance to strike. Yes, we're finally getting somewhere. Turns out 0 resistance is no joke. I'm bonking for huge chunks every hit. Not to mention their magic damage doesn't even hit me all that hard. Once one of the ghosts quits, it becomes even easier to slam down heavy attacks and destroy the hammer. Other than the Sodden Knight, this was the hammer's best display by far. Using the dash rune gets us out of attacks, while the mending band prevents us from poisoning ourselves too often. Almost a perfect execution, actually. Using my extra gold to buy more salt, I was able to cough up 3 more points into stamina, just to let me attack more than once if possible. Considering we are entirely into the endgame now, I decided why not go grab the last few upgrades for the hammer so we could see its full potential. I needed 1 Lord's Order, which as it turns out, is not all that hard to find. You can farm them from a few enemies, the easiest being these swordsmen that teleport behind you. Under the Tree of Men boss fight, you can find 3 of them for an easy farm. After I had that, I remembered that Ronin Cran was still kicking, and we can't forget about him now, can we? According to the wiki, the buff that Ronin Cran uses while he's charging up is the same buff that our golden wine gives us, which makes a bit of sense since he's right behind the golden sanctuary. Not useful info really, but still interesting. Ronin Cran is resistant to everything, although not by much. He's only a bit resistant to strike, which is of course in our favor. Because of how easy this fight tends to be, I decided to mostly use heavy attacks for larger numbers. And wow, that did not disappoint. I take a hit here and there because of it, but man, the damage is absurd. If you can catch him while he's getting his buff going, then you could smash almost half his health bar before he moves again. Hammers do also have a cool normal heavy normal combo attack sending you into the air, but it's not often useful since a charge attack deals arguably more damage. A bit of a light show with both our buffs going, and it's safe to say the endgame is way better for hammers. But my hammer is still not all the way maxed out. Behind this boss, you can reach the ruined temple once again, however, this time from a different side. Important as there's a chest at the top here that houses a King's Order, the final upgrade for our hammer maxing out its damage. You do need both bar brands to get here, still, it's an easy way to max out a weapon. I also decided to upgrade all my armor as high as possible, because armor is actually really strong for defense. No point in avoiding it if we already have the materials and salt. The Witch of the Lake. Very strong to strike, darn it, that's convenient. Really weak to fire and holy, and that's about it. What her stats don't tell you is she just always takes damage. Being one of the few bosses to actually put out really high damage in all her attacks, she doesn't have much HP herself. As most magic users will tell you, that makes a lot of sense. My damage is nowhere near as good as it was against the previous 2 bosses. I'm also forced to jump constantly for all my attacks with her floating up in the air. Still, it could be worse. My armor and buffs resist her magic enough to keep me alive, and with the dash rune you can reposition quickly. Heavy attacks leave you open far too long depending on which attack she deals. You can actually block her dark magic though, with her ball spam attack being an excellent opening for damage. Subpar weapon for the witch, and yet still doable. Plus 2 endurance should help, although I don't exactly know at what weight you get a light dodge with all this gear. On my way to Carsjaw The Cruel, I ran into something unexpected. Well, it should have been expected, really, but I'd not had any issues here before. Spindle beasts are these narwhal horse creatures prowling under pitchwoods. The idea is that you use the phasing platforms above them to avoid fighting the 3 or 4 creatures. That is not easily done, however, and it turns out slow hammer swings are really tough against spindle beasts. They pinned me on their horns repeatedly for like, I don't even know, 5 or 6 deaths, with almost no resistance from me at all. It looked pretty bad. Finally past them, I was able to one-shot the really annoying pike knights though, which is actually pretty cool. Carsjaw, I actually died to on purpose. After only 1 hit, I was like, whoa, that's a lot of damage. But then I had some trouble avoiding his sword. Thinking it would be epic to defeat the cloak figure in only like 4 or 5 heavy hits, I died to try again. And yeah, that's not happening. Carsjaw would not let me charge up all the way, even after baiting out his longer attacks. The battle could have looked pretty with me dodging and weaving for solid damage, but the stubbornness in me couldn't let that happen. Carsjaw, funnily enough, is literally weak to everything except for poison and slash. Even those aren't that high of resistances. Towards the end, I was able to get off a nice charge hit and take him down. I wish we could have had some more chunk damage happen. Still, a great fight though. After hopping over the blue platforms above the Castle of Storms, we meet Myrtiella Mao. She's got very minor resistance to strike and none to really anything else. Okay, what's up with earlier on bosses having much more defense than later ones? While Mao has lots of damage from her several forms of magic, she also leaves herself wide open after using a melee swipe. Exploit this with a heavy attack and she's not much of an obstacle. Later on, when she transitions into triple melee swipes, things get a bit dicey, but still, look at that damage. I definitely did not expect hammers to look this good, considering bosses are so resistant to blunt. Nice unexpected outcome, actually. I threw 4 more points into endurance where I think I have a good enough dodge at this point with this equipment. After traversing the maze that is the alchemy area, we arrive at the Unskinned. Both are heavily resistant to strike, neutral to slash, and then polar opposites. The mage is resistant to all elements, while the brute is weak to all of them. Since they're a duo boss though, their health is more than manageable. With the brute starting things off rushing around the arena, I decided, hey, let's go for the mage first this time. After all, if she's dead, we'll have a lot more free room to run around the arena and avoid the brute. Big guy tried to stop me by standing just in the way of the witch. I was committed though, and after leaving her vulnerable just once more, I smashed her. I bashed her. Yeah, that sounds a lot better. Of course, the brute still sucks to fight, since all of his attacks are followed by AoEs. I am, after all, a tank though, leaving me unafraid in the face of such pain. More slam down attacks because there's nothing cooler possible in an easy first try. Who's next? Come at me. The Forgotten King still has a garbage runback that I died to before even entering the fight. Yet once actually in the battle, I got exactly what I expected. Both the 2 melee guys are weak to strike, with the mage being highly resistant. Stupid mages. There's nothing more disrespectful than the king kicking you in the face. Even worse if he does it twice. A quarter of his HP in a single hit though, well, I'm not gonna complain too much. Take out the knight in 2 more hits, and then time for the floaty freak of failure. Takes a long time since, same story as before. In the air, takes low damage, etc, etc. Get this trash out of here, will you? Almost at the final boss, we meet the Kraeken Dragon. Guess what he's weak to? Not my damage, you could probably just assume that by now. The highest resistance to strike yet, and near immunity to lightning. It takes some effort to dodge his lightning ball, as I need to run far away from him, and my damage is worse than anything thus far, except maybe the third lamb and Bloodless Prince. Over 200 damage a hit isn't really bad, but compare it to Carsjaw or Ronin Cran and it looks not all that great. After far too long and far too much juggling me into the air, we finished off the last of the Krakens. How about a couple upgrades into stamina, cause we might need to dodge a whole lot here soon. Haha, the irony, dude. The final boss's weakness, what do you think it is? Of all the bosses possible in Sodden Sanctuary, the Nameless God has a big old fat 0 resistance to strike, while being highly resistant to all elements. Now that's just something, ain't it? A jumping attack deals more damage than I've ever dealt to this false god, and as long as you're patient, you get easy attack opportunities after all of his moves. Best of all is, if you wall jump as he goes to grab you, it leads into a nice mega damage hit on the way down. I actually had a bit of bad luck here with him only using his teleport sword 1 time, but that was really all I needed. The Nameless God gets smashed to pieces with the ultimate Mountain Breaker. Can you beat Sodden Sanctuary using only hammers with no weapon buffs and no charms? Yes you can. Of course, the golden wine got us through several fights, as certain bosses boast some ridiculous resistance to blunt damage. My guess would be that since two-handing a strength weapon gives you more damage, the devs made blunt a little less broken in certain places. Still, there isn't much more fun than hurling a hammer towards the ground for mega damage, or charging up a hit to rock some undead being's world. Considering most bosses are resistant, I still think the hammer was an excellent choice. Pair it with those elemental buffs, and now you're really gonna have an easy time. With my fastest time yet at almost 6 hours flat, Mr. Bonk has rid the world of evil and become free from an island born of salt. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll catch you next time.